All right.
Oh,
Hello and
fancy.
welcome to ASWB Exam Prep. Today, we are looking at our ASW exam preparation. This is put out by the Association for Advanced Training in the Behavioral Sciences, which is AATBS, which I'm saying out loud because it was referring to AATBS, and I was like, who is that? There's no abbreviation anywhere in this book. So these are some study guides. There are some things we've learned today, right? The purpose of the exam, which has been gatekeeping and to restrict who can get a license, the stated purpose of it is to make sure that every social worker in Ohio is similarly skilled and knowledgeable. And so the questions, we have been going over our glossary of terms, but going through our glossary in our format, here are some things we learned tonight. One thing is that it is 170 questions, right? And that 20 of those questions are the practice questions that don't really count, but you don't really know which ones they are. So really it's a 150 question test. It's not 190 and only 170 count, because that's a question people have sometimes. What they said in the book, which I found highly offensive, is 4 hours is plenty of time. Why is that offensive? Because I know people who have had the lived experience that it was not plenty of time, as a matter of fact, and they found that they needed more time. But they said if you spend 85 seconds per question, that will leave you enough time to still review your answers. So 85 seconds is about 90 seconds. That's a minute and a half. So I know what I like to do during test taking is if I start to feel frustrated by a question, I look at the clock and then I make sure that I haven't spent more than 2 minutes on it. And I might flag it and answer it and move on and then go back towards the end. Tracy, do you have strategies for how you keep track of your time?
Um, I say I do that as well. If I feel like I'm spending too much time, just flag it, keep going.
Yeah, I feel like 85 seconds, like timing myself the whole time, is one more thing to keep track of that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
Michael, how do you track your time during test taking?
Pretty much same thing, except for yeah, I mean I'll glance at the clock and stuff like that. Sometimes just set weird little timers on my watch itself. So that it just like gives a little reminder, vibrate like, hey, you've spent 5 minutes on this question. Let's get it going.
Do they take smartwatches right now?
See, I'm not sure. Was
I
what I
don't
That's
was
a
able
good
to.
question. I don't know.
I like my 3-minute timers on my smartwatch. So that would be a great tool for me, but I wonder if they take it. I know that you have clocks on the screen, so you could watch it there. Actually, that's something that I do in social work. When I'm doing crisis work, especially because I'm like looking at a computer the whole time, is I will watch the minutes in the corner. If I feel like it's not going anywhere, and I will say, okay, it's 8:18 right now. I'm gonna only do reflective statements, simple reflections until 8:21 and give it those 3 minutes. So that is a skill I use to kind of pace myself. So I think I could use that and not be too upset or distracted by it in session. The other thing I learned today is that the ASWB has a toll-free hotline, and there are people there who will talk with you about test taking strategies, anxiety management strategies, timing, how long you want to schedule it, which I had never known before. Like, I know your university generally has resources. My two YSU grads, do you have any resources that you'd like to share with YSU people?
Hmm. From
Do you have
YSU,
any?
you mean?
Hmm.
Hmm. No,
No. So you did
Mm-mm.
not feel like YSU had a lot of test prep.
I think I don't
Not
recall.
as distance learners. I
Yeah,
probably
Okay.
main campus.
because
I
I
know.
was doing, yeah, because I was gonna say I was doing mine, and it was during COVID and everything, so we were doing everything like
Hmm.
home and stuff. So, but Tracy does bring up a good point, though. We're considered, distant learners, so we weren't actually in Youngstown. So I'm sure they have great resources on the campus.
I feel like at Cleveland State, the directive was, oh, we offer classes a lot. People take them as like continuing education credits after graduation. Or there's courses you can buy, or they would tell us to come in and schedule with our social work librarian or our social work administrative assistant to use the lab to do the practice exam. So do you all know if you can take a practice exam at YSU?
I do not.
I know that I took my classes at Lakeland Community College. I think they had spaces where you could do that.
I know they have it at the library because when I went to take my
Mhm.
I asked librarians about everything. So I went to the resource desk and she said, actually, you can take, like, everyone in the state of Ohio can take it proctored for free at the library, and you talk to the librarians and they will schedule it because you can usually only reserve a library computer for 30 minutes, but the librarians have an access code and you can take the one that you like. If you buy this book, you can buy the practice test and you can buy a certain number, and it'll either be unlimited takes or 3 takes or 2 takes or whatever, and it's all different pricing. Well, you can do one for free with any library. And I wonder if you could do them with multiple libraries, because in Ohio, you can get a library card to any library in the state, like
Mhm.
any city, any county. Makes me want to make you guys meet with me at a library. All right. So there are 2 kinds of questions that can be frustrating because every single question, oh, we did say you are not penalized for wrong questions. So every single question only has one correct answer. So for the high school gatekeeping exams of PSAT, SAT, ACT, some of them have like an answer that's worth 1 point, an answer that's worth half a point, an answer that's worth 0, and an answer that's worth -1. So they have weighted questions where you lose points, right? That's not the ASWB. You do not get any deductions of points if you answer it wrong. So it's in your best interest to answer every single one because it could be right, right?
Hmm.
So the problem is that it's also designed that there are questions that are the most right, which means that there are answers that are kind of right and you could do. So that's when we say, but what's the best thing? And we use the mnemonic of aspirins. And what's the first thing? And we think of Farmer Aladdin raises expensive apples in India. Oh, I don't have the whole sentence on there. I have to update that. So for the best thing, the A, what we should consider first is assessing before we act. So Tracy, you had aspirins and you had 2 A's, assess before action.
I was just about to say that.
And it's assess before
Um,
action. And a lot of times ask will be the first word in the answer. And that's how you can tell it's an assess. So assess before action, ask, lots of A's. And the last thing that you do is supporting self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is when I believe that I myself am an effective person. I'm effective at managing my life. I'm effective at getting things done, right? So in social work, when we say teach a man to fish, don't give them a fish. We also in social work kind of say give a person to fish because they'll be better at learning to fish if they're not hungry. We want to support their self-efficacy. We don't want to tell them like come back every day and it's a fishing program, but we don't think that you're ever going to catch anything, so we always feed you at the end. Like we don't want to set it up with the message that we think people are failures. But that's not when someone comes in and they're like, my life is so unmanageable. We don't start by being like, you're going to manage it, right? And totally contradicting them. It's a little bit gaslighty. So, all right, assess before action, going in order. S is starting where the client is. Michael, give an example of starting where the client is. What does that mean?
It's just meeting them where they're at for me, right? So it's not just, it's learning a little bit about the person and not just jumping right into it. That's how I kind of look at it.
Mhm. Okay. What do you think, Tracy?
um, what I think about it is like, if you have a client that comes in crisis, we're gonna deal with the crisis, deal what we have going on now,
I like
as an
both.
example.
Mm-hmm. All right. Protecting life. The ways that we protect life are we go over these ad nauseum in every kind of training, right? But if there is a response that involves making sure the client is conscious, making sure that the client is not like about to have a diabetic event and have their blood sugar drop off versus is the person drunk? Like we always want to check suicidality, homicidality, violence risk in or out. Is this person a fall risk? Is this person seem capable to get themselves home safely? Those are all protect life kinds of things. Informed consent. Informed consent is not something a child can ever give you. And they will spell this out in any kind of children's question is, then are you going to go over informed consent with the child? No, that's a trick question. Because consent means I understand what you're doing. I understand that there are risks. I understand that I'm doing this voluntarily and that you've talked with me about what those risks are and what the possible benefits are. Kids can assent with an A, and that means they can say, my parent has given this permission and consent for me, but here's my assent. Here's what I would like to work on during this time. So there still is some self-determination, but legally it's a different term. Ruling out medical conditions, you do not have to be able to understand what the medical condition can be. If they're like, here's all this stuff and they're considering vasovagal syncope, should you do a treatment plan or send them to have vasovagal syncope ruled out by a vascular neurologist? Like, is a vascular neurologist the right person? I don't know, but they'll know more than I will. That is the correct answer, right? Because that is within their scope of practice if I'm super confused by what this condition could possibly be. If there's medical conditions, a response could be to rule them out, right? Unless earlier on they're saying, is there an option where you can ask the client more question? Yes, we want to ask because we don't understand what's going on. Ooh. Influenced intoxication. This is one of those things where I'm asking, like, what is the purpose of the exam? Because this is a colonial concept that we just don't treat people who are drunk, right? Mr. Place, can you think of any times that someone might be intoxicated in your line of work and you would have to consider whether or not to treat? Do you guys have a policy on it?
100%. So if somebody was to come into our organization and they are clearly intoxicated, I'm going to first find out what they've been using, how much they've been using, and then more than likely I'm going to assist them to go to a medically assisted detox until they get clearance to come back. So,
Which is super, super important in a residential setting. Where you're saying, yeah, come on in, go to sleep. What could happen?
yes.
Tracy, do you have policies on influenced intoxicated behavior in your field setting?
I hope not with the elementary school.
Not a lot of drunk kindergartners. That has not been a primary problem you've been complaining about this semester, right?
No,
What about
luckily.
parents? What do you do if parents come in and you suspect intoxication?
I have not encountered that. So I mean, that's a good question. I'm curious to see how schools handle that. Because I think it'll be different than, like with me working in a hospital, and those are like completely different protocols.
Yes, because when you're working in a hospital, you are watching that person's blood alcohol level every hour
Mm-hmm.
or making a decision about what kind of medical thing is happening or going to happen next.
We we even have like, so they don't even have to be intoxicated. For us, when they come in, they get a 20 panel drug screen upon arrival. And if there's like fentanyl in their system, I'm that's almost like sort of like a once again, here, let's go ahead and get you into a medically assisted detox so that
Mhm.
should anything happen, we're not saying, oh, head on up to your room and well, fall asleep and we'll see you tomorrow, because as we know, there's a high overdose risk factor too that could happen
Mhm.
not even like right away, but even hours after use. So
Mm-hmm.
for us, there's a liability factor included into that also as well. Yeah.
Mhm.
And because we're talking about life or death, we always want to be non-judgmental, right? Because we want people to make the choices they need to make for their life. Michael, you were sharing a lovely house meeting story today about being non-judgmental about there's a lot of sober living, right? This might not be the sober living for you. And if you feel like that consistently, let's have a conversation because I am not going to be judged long term on whether you get sober here, right? My
Hmm.
goal as a social
Mhm.
worker is for you to be reasonably happy, joyous, and free, and to be receiving voluntary, welcoming services. And if this is not that for you, wow, I sure would hope that I can help you find that. That's a non-judgmental response, which is versus you don't like it here, sounds like a you problem, right? That's a whole other tone. In supporting up self-efficacy, which we talked on, which is reinforcing that we believe that the client is in like extending a client dignity and respect means extending them the understanding that they are in the best position to manage their lives. And we are supporting their management of their life.
Hmm.
And Farmer Aladdin, we're gonna definitely type more words here. Raises expensive apples from India. Now I do know plenty of really lovely independently licensed and even supervision designated social workers who have used these mnemonics, and they said that the Farmer Aladdin came up quite a bit. So Farmer Aladdin, feelings. We want to acknowledge or explore the client's feelings first because we want to start from a place of their self-determination. Remember, nobody lands on social workers' doorsteps on a victory lap. And generally, some people have already given them some really great advice, education, references, interventions, right? But it does not solve the problem. So we want to check in with clients first on how they feel about what's happening before we assess, because we have clinical opinions, but we don't have other opinions. We don't have personal opinions. We don't have personal feelings about it. So we want to clear up like what are the client's feelings, and then we move into a more objective assessment where we don't have to feel, the client doesn't have to feel like we're not taking their feelings into account when we're asking them how much, how many, how often, on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being least and 10 being most, and really going to town on these objective things where they're like, well, I guess that part's a 6, but, and they don't have to like interject and tell you why your questions are kind of a little irrelevant. Referring. This is our comfort zone. As Michael said at the beginning, so many resources. Like I just launched right into them at the beginning of our
Mhm.
2 hours, right? We love resources. We love sharing with each other new things that we found, new people who are helping our clients with birth certificate money, because it feels like it's going to fix it. But how many business cards have you all seen in the elevator at the jail, at the Justice Center,
Mhm.
outside of wherever you worked, and been like, these are all good, really, really good leaflets. There's case plans, and people just like drop them when they're leaving the building because they just do not care.
Mhm.
Education. Who loves to educate people more than me? Nobody, but not everyone wants a lecture all the time. The couples who are in couples therapy with me, they really love my lecture series because it's way better than yelling at each other. But they don't like the lecture series as much as when I ask them how they're feeling. Advocacy. We love this as social workers. We are just going to advocate for everybody else in the world, right? To our detriment. But it should really be further down in. And interventions, of course, are last. And we intervene with consent. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 questions. Are you guys ready to
Yay.
bend your minds around some ASWB prep? An elderly woman comes to see you with her daughter. The elderly woman is your client. So one of the test prep recommendations is that when there's a lot of information, we want to look at the stem. And the stem is right here, the very first sentence. The elderly woman comes to see you with her daughter, and the elderly woman is the one coming to see you. Okay. The daughter wants to make arrangements for her mother to enter into assisted living. You attempt to conduct an interview with the elderly woman about the move, but she only wants to talk about the things that happened years ago. Your best response is what?
Ooh.
Initial thoughts about attacking the question.
I just think about my time in Wisconsin. I had these type of conversations so many times.
What was the social work
So
role in Wisconsin?
my thought is trying not to think of what I would do.
So you're trying not to think
A
of what you
hospital.
would do.
Yep. Yeah.
That's an excellent impulse. That's one of the prompts in here is try not to think about what you would do because you were working in a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And in a
Right.
hospital,
And
you
we did discharge planning
Mhm.
to assisted livings.
And so you're planning. Immediately, you're thinking about, as a hospital, you're thinking about the assisted livings. But you remember
Yep,
that
because
last
that's how.
slide, I was telling you can't refer. Tracy, my needs and
Mhm.
resource person. Okay.
Yep.
Michael, what would you want to do that you were holding yourself back from?
I mean, I look at the first words of each one of those, right? Like tell, encourage, have, try, right?
Mhm.
So like I'm like doing process elimination just off of those right there, right? Like I'm not gonna tell somebody what to do, and I'm not gonna have the person do something that it doesn't seem like from what I'm getting that they want to do, so I just sit back and I think, I'm gonna probably just encourage.
Ding, 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 ding. Encourage. I love that.
I
I
like that
love that
approach.
thought process. And this is
Right?
why
Mhm.
this is so valuable to do test prep with other people. So according to this is best, the best thing is assessing before action and starting where the client is. And I think that B is absolutely going to give you that result. And we have to identify that the daughter is not the client here,
Right.
which is
Right.
a bias because social workers tend to be working age, not elderly. And so we identify with the working age daughter who's like, can you please help me with my mother? I can't do this. Right. But she is not.
Mhm.
And we can definitely refer the daughter to caregiver support groups.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You are in a counseling session with a struggling couple. Can't relate. They argue. Where did it go? They argue through the whole session. You attempt to help them set some goals for improving their relationship. In the face of all the arguing, what is the best way to proceed? So, Michael, what is jumping out at you about this problem? How would you attack or problem solve here?
You attempt to help set some goals in the face of all the arguing. What is the best way to proceed? I mean, obviously, I'm not setting goals for them, so I'm going to take B out of the equation. I'm asking them to do it. I'm not setting them. So it's going to be, since I'm asking them, keyword would be asked for the answer. So I'm just breaking it down. So it takes B and D out of the equation. And then I'm not going to ask them to leave just because they can't discuss things amicably, right? Because obviously they're in my office because they can't be so amicable together. So I would just ask them to reach a compromise on specific item. No, maybe.
Beautiful.
I
That was a
I
beautiful
would
evaluation. Do not answer. Don't come on and answer yet because you've identified problems with all four. And I think that's a great starting point. Tracy, what is jumping out at you?
Um, now that I'm like looking at them, there is some, it's like the things that you don't like with each
Well, first of
answer.
all, let's identify that no
And
one likes working with couples.
I don't know, to reach a compromise,
Mhm.
that seems like a lot to do.
I have many couple sessions where I'm like, okay, we've been talking about this for 18 months, and yet
Mhm.
again, we are back to last Thanksgiving. Seems like a pattern that we have come back to this, and we talk about last Thanksgiving every time I see you, right? So like agreeing on that one thing is not going to be my goal for compromise. But that is a really, really common strategy for couples therapists to be like, you guys don't talk about the big stuff outside of here. We'll talk about the big stuff in here, right? Because it's just too hard. I would kind of I would lean towards that same response, ask them to reach a compromise, except that if we look for what are we doing best, we're really looking at like supporting self-efficacy there. Well, I was thinking, no, it's not assess or intervening. We're not referring there. We're assessing before
Would you,
act. Are there any of those that's
but
in
are
the
we starting
Hmm?
where they're at? I mean, this is an argument.
But they've been arguing for how long? How many sessions?
And that, and now we're trying to get more information.
Right.
We're trying to
I
And
need
get
that's
more
the hard part.
information. Well, I think aspirins and Farmer Aladdin would both say like we ask and assess early on. However,
Mhm.
we're ruling out A, and none of us are really interested in them having individual sessions rather than joint meetings,
No.
which I love that for you guys. There are a couples therapists who do that as a part of their process, and they do that as a part of their process really intentionally. But because they're fighting in session, that's not a reason to break them out. They need to be there as a couple. So then we're really looking at B or C. So how do we decide between B and C? Of setting a goal for improving communication and C, asking them. The correct answer is B,
B.
to set a goal for improving communication between them in emotional situations. So that one is we are sidestepping the problem directly. We're avoiding the major conflict, and we're working on the communication goals that are going to affect them, not just in the hot stuff, but we're teaching them a skill to manage communication and have some objectivity about their communication style. So, I like Farmer Aladdin's verbs better, so I keep going back to that one to try to say it. But for the best one, we are starting where the client is, which is we need to understand how to communicate when we're stressed. I like that question and I include it because it's confusing and there's not a great answer. And if
Mm.
you are taking your
Mhm.
test, we have spent a couple minutes on this one, right? So if you walk in and you're like, I'm not sure, they're all rough, this would be one we would say, all right, we're going to look at the clock, we're going to talk through it, and then if we get to 3 minutes, we're going to mark it and move on.
Mm.
All right. A client walks into the agency office in a hostile and aggressive mood. Never have I ever seen this happen. He begins to verbally threaten the staff. What is the first thing you should do? Tracy, how do you feel about this question?
Um,
How are you approaching?
again, it's like what kind of agency are we working at?
Yeah. So we do not want to do something that
I know.
seems like what my boss would tell me to do. I've worked a lot of places that would be like, call
Mhm.
911, threat, that's a
Mhm.
blue form.
Yep.
What do you think, Michael?
So
I mean, it's almost like one of those things where you want to just, uh, what is the first thing you should do, right? Like, I mean, so acknowledge the fact that they are upset and why, right? Maybe it's
mhm,
the receptionist left them on hold 3 times
mhm,
for 30 minutes and just disconnected,
Yeah.
you know?
So you are protecting life by not attempting to change the
mhm,
subject. If
Mhm.
someone comes in and I'm the face, right? And they come in and they're like, I'm gonna go kick Stacy now. I don't go, no, you're not. We're gonna talk about SpongeBob. I'm protecting my life in that moment. So we've
Right.
eliminated A and B, and now we need to decide
mhm.
between C and D. And Michael, you went with acknowledging, wow, you are feeling so angry right now, which feels like a better answer. Tracy, what do you think between C and D?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking C, and to be honest, I have a bad habit of not doing that in the school setting because, if something is going on, people are like, kids are upset. We always try to figure out like what is going on.
Yeah.
So
And
that's where I get tripped up.
and we want to be generally, this is first thing, not generally. Generally, we want to be really open and say, what kind of feeling is this? Right? Because I don't
Mhm,
want to put in the word, if there's 35 different ways to say I'm irritated right now, I don't want to use my language, which is irritated. If this kid really, really feels annoyed or aggravated, and
mhm,
that's the word that feels more accurate. So I don't want to steal the nuance, except I know someone in crisis does not have access to their full prefrontal cortex. So they might not
mhm,
have the words. And it is just a normal function of human behavior that we are less verbal the more upset we are. So instead of saying, how do you feel? Ooh, tell me more about that, which is pretty open. In crisis, we move into limit setting mode and, ooh, that looks angry. Wow, you are feeling so hostile right now. So C is correct because you're directly naming it because you're in more of a
mhm.
crisis situation. All right, last question. No bonus points tonight.
Oh,
It's okay. The bonus points are going to be when you pass your test.
yes.
Aspen is working on designing a research project. So Aspen is working on designing it that measures the effect of poverty on school performance of children. She has reviewed previous literature on the subject, demonstrated the need for the research, and she has described what will be needed to test her ideas and the method of collecting data. Furthermore, she has described how to test whether or not her results are valid. I was going to say there's research, and I was like, this all sounds like scientific method to me. Like she's following
Mhm.
steps of something. Okay, what part has she most likely left out? Do you guys have any thoughts on strategy for attacking this question?
No.
Okay. I would go through this because there's information, there's so much information. I'm going to be looking between the question and the answers to rule out. So I'm going
Mhm.
to start from the
Yep.
bottom. Has she justified the research selection? She's demonstrated the research,
Then
the need for it, right? She's reviewed the literature. That seems like a yes, she's already done that. Has she been specific about her hypothesis? I didn't see that she
Mhm.
said that. Like, this is the effect that I think it's going to be positive or negative, right? I don't see anything about a correlation. So I'm thinking maybe C. Has she collected enough data? She's talked about the method of collecting data. Has she obtained informed consent?
Review the previous literature.
Not that one.
one.
I guess the hypothesis is the effect of poverty on school performance.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
What do you guys think is our most likely answer?
Informed consent.
But it's not, I'm confused because it doesn't say how is she doing this research? Is this going to be like interviews with the kids, like, or she just, I don't know,
We're gonna go with
getting data from like teachers?
she has not collected the data,
She's just said how the method of collecting it.
but she's talked about the method of collecting it.
Right. But not that she has.
But it says what part of the design. So you don't
Smells
have
like-
to have collected research for design. I'm going to tell you, there's nothing in here about informed consent, and this is about children. So I think that this is the answer here is A. Aspen has not
Informed.
obtained enough informed consent. It feels so
But
unsatisfying.
would you need informed consent if you're not doing direct research though? Like directly with the individuals? That's where I got a little confused.
Reviewed, demonstrated.
You do need informed consent, and if you're doing a chart review, you need to explain that people gave consent for data collection during that. Like
That
I
makes
did a
sense.
research study in grad school, and the people I was working with could give consent for the treatment, which was like a trauma, PTSD, and substance abuse group. It was a 10-week session. They're consenting to that. But when it came to like how we were going to measure if they had gotten better or not, we decided the IRB would not approve additional pre-test, post-test. And they would not approve additional interviews because they felt that it was too protected of a population. There were too many needs, and so it was too great of a risk. Like, we want these people to be getting treatment. We don't want them to be going through research, because I was working with adults living in PSH who have a severe and persistent mental illness. Many of them had addiction as well, and all of them were chronically homeless. So they said it's just too much risk. Those are the people you normally leave out of a research study. So I had to go back and demonstrate that this measure, we decided to go with one of the like quarterly things that the case managers have to fill out. And it was, we were looking at emergency room days and inpatient hospitalization days before and after. And I had to demonstrate that they had given consent already before when those were done, previous to being involved with me. So I know you have to talk about it, even if you're not actively collecting it at that time. Informed consent isn't always.
That makes sense.
My
Mhm.
IRB was turned down 14 times. It passed 15th time. So you will never catch me not going for it for informed consent first. All right. I'm going to stop my record.